It was supposed to be a regular Saturday night, the kind of evening where I could escape the monotony of the week, laugh with friends, and recharge my spirit. My wife, Lisa, had convinced me to attend a party hosted by one of her colleagues. I didn't want to go at first. I'm not much of a social butterfly, and I always felt a little out of place at her work events. But she insisted. "It'll be fun," she said. "You need to relax for once." So I went. I dressed up, put on my best attempt at a smile, and braced myself for a night of small talk and clinking glasses. The house was impressive, one of those modern mansions that screams wealth and success, the kind of place where everything, down to the last detail, was designed to impress. When we arrived, Lisa seemed different, more energized, more vibrant. She greeted people with an enthusiasm I rarely saw from her. Her laughter carried across the room, her hand brushing my arm as she introduced me to her colleagues. For a moment, I thought maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. But as the night went on, I started to notice things, subtle things. She disappeared for stretches of time, leaving me alone to fend off awkward conversations with people I barely knew. When she came back, her cheeks would be flushed, and she avoided my eyes. I chalked it up to the wine and her excitement. It was her world, after all. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Then came the moment that shifted everything. I was wandering through the house, trying to find Lisa, when I overheard laughter coming from one of the upstairs rooms. Something about it stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't the kind of laughter you'd expect at a party. It was intimate, almost conspiratorial. My stomach tightened as I followed the sound, my steps hesitant, yet propelled by an unshakable need to know. The door was slightly ajar, and what I saw through that crack in the doorway would be etched into my memory forever. Lisa, my wife of 8 years, was sitting on the edge of a bed, her hand resting on the knee of a man I didn't recognize. Their faces were close, too close. He whispered something in her ear, and she giggled, her hand sliding up his leg. My world tilted on its axis. I wanted to burst into the room, to confront them, to demand an explanation, but something held me back. Instead, I stood there, frozen, watching as the woman I thought I knew leaned in to kiss him. The pain was instant and sharp, like a knife twisting in my gut. My chest felt heavy, my throat tight. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I don't know how long I stood there. It felt like hours, but it was probably just a few seconds. Eventually, I turned and walked away, my mind racing. The party was still in full swing downstairs, music thumping and people laughing, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I grabbed my coat and left without saying a word to anyone. As I walked down the driveway, the cold night air hit me, but it did nothing to clear the fog in my mind. Lisa thought I was weak, that I would crumble under the weight of what I had just seen, but she was wrong. I was not broken. I was angry, and in that moment, a plan started to form in my mind. She didn't know it yet, but this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing, replaying what I had just witnessed over and over again. The look on Lisa's face, the way she laughed with that man. It felt like a dagger straight through my chest. I wanted to scream, to punch something, but instead I just drove in silence. My fury was a fire that burned quietly, fueling something much darker than anger, determination. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark living room, staring at nothing, my thoughts spiraling. This wasn't just betrayal. This was humiliation. I had stood there like a fool, watching my wife with another man while the rest of the world partied downstairs. How long had this been going on? Who was that guy? Was this the first time, or was I just too blind to see it before? The questions swirled in my head, but one thing became clear. I needed answers, and not just for the sake of knowing. I needed to know how deep this rabbit hole went so I could plan my next move. Lisa wasn't going to get away with this, not without consequences. I waited up for her that night. She came home hours later, the sound of her heels clicking against the tile floor. She was humming softly to herself, probably thinking I was fast asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. I stayed silent, watching her from the shadows as she kicked off her shoes and poured herself a glass of wine. She looked so comfortable, so at ease, like she had nothing to hide. It made my blood boil. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I held back. Not yet. I needed to be smart about this. Emotional outbursts wouldn't get me anywhere. They'd only give her the upper hand. Instead, I pretended to be asleep when she came into the bedroom. She slipped under the covers without a care in the world, her back turned to me. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind churning with plans. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to start digging. Lisa was still asleep, so I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. I knew her passcode. It was our anniversary date, ironically enough, and within seconds I was scrolling through her messages. At first, I didn't see anything suspicious, but then I found a string of texts with a name I didn't recognize, Mike. My heart pounded as I opened the conversation. The texts were casual at first, but as I scrolled further back, the tone changed. Flirty emojis, inside jokes, plans to meet up. It was all there. And then I found the smoking gun, a message from Mike saying, "Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." My hands trembled as I read her reply. "Same here. You always know how to make me feel special." It felt like someone had punched me in the stomach, but instead of breaking down, I took screenshots of everything. I forwarded the messages to my own phone, making sure to cover my tracks. This was just the beginning. I needed more. I wasn't going to confront her with half-baked evidence. I needed undeniable proof. Over the next few days, I became a man on a mission. I called in sick to work and started following Lisa. She thought she was so clever, so careful, but she underestimated me. I watched as she left the house in the afternoon, claiming she was meeting a friend for coffee, only to head straight to a hotel downtown. I waited in the parking lot, my stomach churning as I watched her walk in. An hour later, she came out with Mike, laughing and holding his hand. I took pictures, my hands shaking with a mix of rage and adrenaline. Every click of the camera felt like a step closer to the truth, closer to the moment when I would finally confront her. But even then, I knew I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed to hit her where it hurt, to make sure she understood the gravity of what she had done. This wasn't just about me. It was about reclaiming my dignity. By the time I got home that night, I had a folder full of evidence, screenshots, photos, timestamps. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of proof in front of me. Lisa came home a few hours later, her mood light and cheerful, completely oblivious to the storm brewing in her own house. She kissed me on the cheek and asked how my day was, as if nothing had happened. I forced a smile and told her it was fine, all the while feeling the weight of the truth pressing down on me. She thought she had me fooled, that I was just some clueless husband too naive to see what was happening right under his nose. But she was wrong. Lisa didn't know it yet, but her world was about to crumble, and I was going to make sure of it. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back control of my life. The days that followed were the calm before the storm. On the surface, everything seemed normal. Lisa carried on with her double life, oblivious to the fact that I knew everything. But beneath my calm exterior, a storm was raging. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was determined. I had all the evidence I needed, but now I needed to plan my next move carefully. This wasn't going to be a spur-of-the-moment confrontation. No, I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. I started laying the groundwork for my plan. First, I opened a private bank account in my name and began transferring small amounts of money from our joint account. Lisa never noticed. She wasn't exactly the most financially savvy person. I also started gathering all the important documents, the deed to the house, our marriage certificate, everything I would need for what was coming. I wasn't just preparing for a confrontation. I was preparing for a clean break. Next, I reached out to a divorce lawyer. I found someone who specialized in cases involving infidelity, someone who could help me navigate the legal minefield I was about to enter. When I met with the lawyer, I laid everything out, the screenshots, the photos, the timestamps. Her face hardened as she flipped through the evidence. "This is airtight," she said. "You have a strong case here. Are you ready for this?" I nodded. I've never been more ready. The lawyer explained the steps we needed to take: filing for divorce, securing my financial assets, and gathering witnesses if necessary. It was a lot to take in, but I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. For the first time since discovering Lisa's betrayal, I felt like I was in control. But there was still one piece of the puzzle missing. Lisa didn't know that I knew. She thought she was still in the clear, that her secret was safe. That's when I decided to set a trap, one that would expose her lies in the most undeniable way possible. I started by pretending to plan a romantic getaway for the two of us. I told Lisa I wanted to rekindle our relationship, that we needed some time away from the stress of everyday life. Her reaction was suspiciously enthusiastic. She probably thought it was a way to distract me from noticing her affair. I booked a weekend at a luxury resort, but I had no intention of actually going. On the day of our supposed trip, I told Lisa I had to stop by work to finish up some last-minute paperwork. She didn't question it, and as soon as I left the house, I parked a few blocks away and waited. Sure enough, within an hour, she was on the move. She thought she was so clever, sneaking out to meet Mike while I was busy at work. But I was one step ahead of her. I followed her to a hotel downtown, the same one I had seen her go to before. This time, I didn't just take pictures, I recorded a video. I filmed her walking into the hotel, hand in hand with Mike, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. My heart pounded as I watched them disappear inside. It took every ounce of self-control not to storm in after them, but I knew I had to stick to the plan. When she came home that evening, she acted like nothing had happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked how my day was, and even thanked me for planning our getaway. The audacity of it all made my blood boil, but I kept my composure. I needed her to believe that I was still in the dark. The next part of my plan involved Lisa's friends and family. Over the years, I had built strong relationships with the people in her life, people who trusted me and respected our marriage. I started reaching out to them, subtly planting seeds of doubt about Lisa's behavior. I didn't outright accuse her of anything. I just mentioned that she seemed distant lately, that I was worried about our relationship. It wasn't long before they started noticing things too. Then came the night of the party Lisa had been talking about for weeks, a fancy event at her friend's house, the kind of party where everyone dressed to impress. I knew it was the perfect setting for the final act of my plan. I let her think everything was fine, that I was excited to go with her. She had no idea what was coming. When we arrived at the party, I played my part perfectly. I mingled with the guests, laughed at their jokes, and acted like the loving husband everyone thought I was. Lisa, meanwhile, was her usual charming self, but I could see the way her eyes darted around the room, looking for someone. It didn't take long to figure out who. Mike was there too. I watched from a distance as they exchanged glances, their interactions subtle but unmistakable. I stayed close enough to keep an eye on them, but far enough away that they wouldn't suspect anything. And then, just as I had planned, I left the party without a word. Lisa didn't even notice I was gone. As I drove away, my heart was pounding, not with fear or sadness, but with anticipation. Lisa thought she had won, that I was clueless and broken. But she had no idea that her world was about to come crashing down. I wasn't just planning revenge, I was crafting it. The party had been the perfect setup, the final piece in the chess game I was playing with Lisa. She had no idea I was miles ahead, preparing to knock over her carefully arranged lies like a house of cards. That night, as I drove home from the party, my mind raced with the steps I'd carefully planned. The trap was set, and all I had to do now was pull the strings. The first thing I did when I got home was gather everything I had collected, the photos, the videos, and the text messages. It wasn't just evidence. It was a narrative, a story that told the truth about Lisa's betrayal in a way she couldn't deny. I organized it into a digital folder and backed it up in multiple places, my laptop, an external drive, and even the cloud. If she tried to twist things around, I would have the truth at my fingertips. But this wasn't just about confronting Lisa. It was about exposing her deceit to everyone who thought she was the perfect wife. Her family, her friends, her colleagues, they all saw her as this charming, put-together woman. I wanted them to see what I had seen, to understand the depth of her betrayal. The next morning, Lisa was still in bed when I started making calls. First, I reached out to her parents. They had always been kind to me, treating me like a son. It hurt to involve them, but they needed to know the truth. "I think you should come over," I said, keeping my voice steady. "There's something I need to talk to you about. It's important." Her parents agreed to come by later that afternoon. Next, I called her closest friends, the ones she always bragged to about our perfect marriage. "I have something to share with you," I told them. One by one, they agreed to meet at our house. By the time Lisa woke up, I had already set the stage. She came into the kitchen, yawning and stretching, completely unaware of the storm that was brewing. "Morning," she said casually, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Did you have fun at the party last night?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, it was eye-opening." She didn't catch the sarcasm in my tone. "I'm glad you came. I think it was good for us to get out and socialize more." I nodded, fighting back the urge to say what was really on my mind. Yeah, I think you're right. The hours dragged on as I waited for everyone to arrive. Lisa spent the morning lounging around, scrolling through her phone and humming to herself. She had no idea that her world was about to implode. By early afternoon, the guests started to arrive. Lisa looked confused as her parents walked through the door, followed closely by her friends. "What's going on?" she asked, glancing at me. "I thought it would be nice to have a little get-together," I said casually. "You know, reconnect with everyone." She raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Her friends settled in, chatting and laughing, while her parents sat on the couch, looking slightly uneasy. Lisa was still trying to figure out what was happening, but she didn't have long to wonder. Once everyone was seated, I stood up and cleared my throat. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "There's something I need to share with all of you, something I've recently discovered about Lisa." Lisa's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice sharp. I ignored her and continued. "For the past few months, Lisa has been having an affair. I have proof, photos, videos, text messages, and I thought it was only fair that the people closest to her know the truth." The room fell silent. Lisa's friends looked at her in shock, while her parents exchanged horrified glances. Lisa, on the other hand, was frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "You're lying," she finally spat, her voice trembling. "This is insane." I reached for my laptop, which was sitting on the coffee table. "I wish I were lying," I said, opening the folder I had prepared. "But the evidence speaks for itself." I projected the photos onto the TV screen, one by one. The images of Lisa with Mike at the hotel, the text messages exchanged between them. It was all there, laid out for everyone to see. Gasps filled the room as the reality of her betrayal sank in. Lisa stood up, her face red with fury. "How dare you?" she shouted. "This is private. You had no right to do this." I looked her straight in the eye. "You lost the right to privacy the moment you betrayed me. This isn't just about me. It's about the lies you told everyone in this room." Her parents were visibly shaken. Her mother had tears in her eyes, while her father's face was a mask of fury. "Lisa, is this true?" her father demanded. "Did you really do this?" Lisa stammered, unable to form a coherent response. Her friends looked at her with a mix of disbelief and disgust. The image she had spent years crafting, the perfect wife, the devoted partner, was shattered in an instant. I could see the wheel turning in her head as she tried to come up with an excuse, a way to spin the situation in her favor, but there was no escaping the truth. The evidence was irrefutable, and everyone in that room knew it. As the weight of her actions finally began to sink in, Lisa crumbled. She sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for it to happen." But her apology meant nothing to me. It was too late for that. This wasn't just about what she had done. It was about the lies, the deception, the complete lack of respect for me and our marriage. I took a deep breath and turned to her parents. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice firm. "Lisa has made her choice, and now I'm making mine." Her father nodded solemnly. "We understand," he said quietly, "and we're so sorry this happened." As the meeting came to an end, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. Lisa's mask had been ripped off, her lies exposed for everyone to see. But this was only the beginning. My plan wasn't finished yet. There was still one more step to take, one final move to ensure that Lisa understood the full consequences of her betrayal. The day after the party was heavy with tension. Lisa avoided me all morning, skulking around the house like a shadow, clearly unsure of where we stood after the bombshell I'd dropped the day before. She tried to act normal, but it was painfully obvious she was on edge. I, on the other hand, carried on as if nothing had changed, calm, composed, but simmering with purpose beneath the surface. I wanted her to stew in the uncertainty. She thought she knew me, thought I'd just yell, maybe cry, and eventually forgive her like some lovesick fool. She had no idea what was coming. I spent the morning finalizing my plan. With the evidence already gathered and the groundwork laid, it was time to escalate things. Lisa thought she was clever, that she could manipulate me into forgiving her and sweep everything under the rug. But I wasn't about to let her off so easily. It began with the finances. Over the past few weeks, I'd been quietly transferring money out of our joint accounts into a separate account she didn't know existed. Every transfer was small enough to go unnoticed, but by now I had secured a significant chunk of our savings. I wasn't about to let her walk away with a dime more than she deserved. I also froze her access to our credit cards, locking her out of any financial lifeline she might have used to continue her double life. She wouldn't notice right away. Lisa never paid much attention to the bills. But when she did, it would be too late. That afternoon, I got a text from one of Lisa's closest friends, Sophie. She had been at the party and was one of the few who stayed behind after the confrontation to check on me. Sophie had always been kind, but now she was furious. Not at me, but at Lisa. "I can't believe she did this to you," Sophie wrote. "If there's anything I can do to help, let me know." I hesitated before replying. Sophie was one of Lisa's best friends, someone who had been part of her life long before I came along. But after what had happened, it seemed like even her closest allies were turning against her. It was a small victory, but it gave me the push I needed to move forward. "Thanks, Sophie," I replied. "Actually, there might be something you can do." I explained my plan to Sophie, carefully omitting the finer details. I needed someone on the inside, someone Lisa trusted, to keep an eye on her and report back to me. Sophie agreed without hesitation, saying she couldn't stand the thought of Lisa getting away with what she'd done. It was a calculated risk, but I trusted her to play her part. Meanwhile, Lisa started to unravel. That evening, I caught her pacing in the living room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She was texting someone, her fingers moving furiously across the screen. She didn't notice me watching from the doorway, and I didn't make any effort to hide my presence. Finally, she looked up, startled to see me standing there. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Nothing," she said quickly, shoving her phone into her pocket. "Just talking to a friend." I raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Let her think I was oblivious. The more she underestimated me, the better. As the days went on, the cracks in Lisa's facade began to show. She was jumpy, defensive, and increasingly irritable. She started asking questions, testing the waters to see if I was planning anything. "Are we okay?" she asked one night as we sat across from each other at the dinner table. I looked up from my plate, meeting her gaze. "Why wouldn't we be?" She hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. I don't know. You've been quiet lately." "I've had a lot on my mind," I said simply. She nodded, but didn't push further. She was walking on eggshells, and I relished every second of it. This was just the beginning, and she was already unraveling. The tipping point came a week later, when Lisa made the mistake of trying to turn the situation around on me. She came into the guest room, where I'd been sleeping since the fallout, and sat on the edge of the bed, her face a mask of forced sincerity. "We need to talk," she began, her voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. "About what?" I asked, not looking up from my laptop. "About us," she said. "I know things have been tense lately, but I think we can get through this if we just—" I closed the laptop with a soft click, cutting her off. "If we just what, Lisa? Pretend none of this happened? Pretend I didn't see you with another man? Pretend you didn't lie to me over and over again?" Her face turned red, a mix of anger and embarrassment. "I've already told you it was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "Don't insult my intelligence," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I've seen the messages. I've seen the photos. I've seen everything, Lisa, so don't stand there and try to downplay what you did." She opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand to stop her. "No more lies. No more excuses. I've given you every chance to come clean, and you've done nothing but dig yourself deeper into this mess." Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life with, was gone. All that remained was a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "You think I'm just going to sit back and let you walk all over me?" I continued, my voice rising slightly. "You think I'm going to let you play the victim here? You've underestimated me, Lisa, and that's your biggest mistake." For the first time since this ordeal began, she looked genuinely afraid. She didn't know what I was planning, and that uncertainty was eating away at her. She tried to regain control, to play the part of the wounded wife, but it was too late. The game was over, and she had already lost. "I want you out of the house by the end of the week," I said, my voice firm. "I've already spoken to a lawyer, and the divorce papers will be ready soon. You can take whatever you want, but you're not taking me down with you." Her face crumbled, but I didn't stay to watch. I left the room, leaving her to face the reality of what she had done. This was just the beginning, and I wasn't done yet. The trap was closing in, and Lisa was about to learn just how far I was willing to go. The days after I told Lisa to leave were a whirlwind of emotion and calculated moves. I knew she wouldn't go quietly, but I wasn't about to let her dictate the narrative. While she sulked and occasionally lashed out, I stayed focused. Every move I made was deliberate, designed to ensure she couldn't weasel her way out of the situation. It didn't take long for Lisa to start trying to manipulate me again. On the third day after our confrontation, she approached me in the kitchen, her face streaked with tears. "Please, can we talk?" she pleaded, her voice trembling. "I know I messed up, but I don't want to lose us." I didn't even look up from my coffee. "You lost us the moment you decided someone else was more important," I said flatly. "Save your tears, Lisa. They don't work on me anymore." Her face twisted with frustration, and just like that, the crocodile tears disappeared. "You can't throw away everything we've built over one mistake," she snapped, her voice rising. "We've been together for years, and you're just going to give up?" I set my coffee mug down and met her gaze, my expression calm but firm. "This isn't about giving up. This is about consequences. Actions have them, Lisa. You're just not used to facing yours." She stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind her. I knew it wasn't the end of her theatrics, but I also knew I was ready for whatever she threw at me. Lisa's favorite weapon had always been manipulation, but she'd finally met someone who wasn't buying what she was selling. That evening, as I was organizing more of my documents, my phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. "You're not going to believe this. Lisa's been venting to everyone who will listen, trying to paint herself as the victim." I rolled my eyes. Of course she was. Lisa's greatest skill was rewriting history to suit her needs, but I had something she didn't: the truth. And I wasn't afraid to use it. "Thanks for the heads up," I replied. "Let them believe what they want. The truth always comes out." But Sophie wasn't done. "There's something else. She's meeting Mike tomorrow night at that same hotel. Thought you should know." My stomach tightened at her words. Lisa was still seeing him, after everything that had happened. It was like she didn't even care. But instead of anger, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This was my chance to end things once and for all, to strip away any remaining illusion Lisa might have about salvaging our relationship. The next evening, I parked my car a block away from the hotel and waited. Sophie had given me the exact time Lisa and Mike were supposed to meet, and I wasn't about to miss the show. As I sat in the car, my mind raced with possibilities. Part of me wanted to barge in, to confront them right there and then, but another part of me, the smarter part, knew there was a better way. When Lisa arrived, I stayed back, watching as she walked into the hotel with all the confidence of someone who thought they'd gotten away with everything. She was dressed to impress, her hair and makeup done like she was going on some glamorous date. It made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't the time for emotions. Once she was inside, I followed at a distance, my phone in hand. I didn't need to confront her in person. What I needed was proof, concrete, undeniable proof that would seal her fate. I waited in the lobby, pretending to scroll through my phone, as she and Mike checked in at the front desk. When they disappeared into the elevator, I snapped a photo. It wasn't much, but it was enough to add to my growing arsenal. By the time I left the hotel, I had everything I needed: the photos, the messages, the recordings. It was all there. Lisa could cry, scream, and manipulate all she wanted, but she couldn't escape the truth. And neither could Mike. The next morning, I sent an email to Lisa's family and friends. It was short and to the point, with all the evidence attached. I didn't add any commentary or emotional pleas. I let the facts speak for themselves. Within hours, my phone was blowing up with calls and messages. Lisa's carefully curated image was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. By the time Lisa found out, it was too late. She came storming into the house, her face red with fury. "How dare you?" she shouted, throwing her purse onto the floor. "You had no right to do this." "I had every right," I said calmly. "You built this mess, Lisa. I'm just making sure everyone sees it for what it is." She sputtered, her words tripping over each other as she tried to defend herself, but there was nothing left to say. The game was over, and she had lost. As she packed her bags and left the house for the last time, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of freedom. Lisa thought I was broken, that I would crumble under the weight of her betrayal. But she was wrong. I was not broken. I was finally free.